We have been taught lies. Reality is not at all what we perceive it to be. We cannot survive any longer by hanging on to the falsehoods of the past. Reality must be discerned at all costs if we are to be a part of the future. Truth must prevail in all instances, no matter who it hurts or helps.
Ah, the government. It loves you and wants to keep you safe and well. It even wants to make paying taxes, fines, and court costs easier for you. How? Well, you'll need to meet your Strawman. He was born the same day you were. He looks like you, has the same name, and lives in your house, but you never knew he existed. You will have even paid his parking tickets or taxes. The worst part? He's been dead from day one. From every birth certificate, a legal personality, or legal fiction, is created with the same name to confuse little old you into thinking it's you. So, there is a human you and a paper you, or as it's commonly known, a strawman. So when it seems like government officials, court clerks, or the police are speaking English, they aren't. They're speaking legalese, designed to make you agree to verbal and written contracts without even knowing about it, all spun from Black's Law Dictionary. For example, when the police say, "Do you understand?" you'll say, "Yes." What they are really saying is, "Do you stand under our authority?" Oops-a-daisy, you just created a verbal contract with them. Oh, you clever government. Did you know that whenever you register something, you are handing over title to the person you register it with? That's right. Whenever you register something with the government, they assume it belongs to them. Registered your car? Super! Now you are the registered keeper of your vehicle, and the government can crush it when you don't pay your, strawman's taxes. Expecting a new bundle of joy? Well, then you need to register your little darling with a birth certificate. Then they can start the process all over again and create a new strawman for your little one. Isn't that great? So when Junior grows up, he'll be able to generate revenue just like you have. When you notify on your baby by signing the birth certificate, your child becomes a ward of state. And if the government doesn't like what you're doing, they'll assume it's okay to take the child away or make new rules for things they don't like. Not enough school? Smacking your child? Shouting too loudly? Then it's off to social services for the little one. When you get a bill, it's sent to you, but belongs to your strawman, not you. That's why bills, fines, and summons start with Mr., Mrs., or Ms. Sometimes you'll see your surname in capitals, just like on a gravestone. That's because your strawman is dead, and just a silly piece of paper, created before you could comprehend or even consent to it. When you go to court, you represent your strawman, so you, the human, take on any costs, fees, taxes, and fines involved for the strawman. The human you doesn't even need to pay them. But you made a contract with the court by appearing on behalf of your legal personality or strawman, just like the government knew you would. Confused? Well, don't worry. The government doesn't want you to know anyway. If you knew, you'd stop paying things like council tax and parking tickets. Because when you go to court, you are representing your strawman. You are you, alive and made of flesh and blood. Your strawman, or legal personality, is a piece of paper created from your birth certificate. And you think it's you. What a silly Billy. Would you like to know more? Well, then go over to tpuc.org. Get up, get informed, and get real.
As we review the achievements of this session of the 73rd Congress, it is made increasingly clear that its task was essentially that of completing and fortifying the work which it had begun in March 1933. That was no easy task, but the Congress was equal to it. It has been well said that while there were a few exceptions, this Congress displayed a greater freedom from mere partisanship than any other peacetime Congress in our history since the administration of President Washington. Substantial gains, well known to all of you, have justified our course. I could cite statistics to show you as unanswerable measures of our national progress. Figures to show the gain in the average weekly pay envelope of workers in the great majority of our industries. Figures to show hundreds of thousands of people reemployed in private industries and other hundreds of thousands given new employment through the expansion of direct and indirect government assistance of various kinds. In the working out of a great national program that seeks the primary good of the greater number, it is true that the toes of some people are being stepped on and are going to be stepped on. But these toes belong to the comparative few who seek to retain or to gain position or riches or both by some shortcut that is harmful to the greater good. The program of the past year is definitely in operation, and that operation month by month is being made to fit into the web of old and new conditions. A few timid people who fear progress will try to give you new and strange names for what we are doing. Sometimes they will call it fascism, and sometimes communism, and sometimes regimentation, and sometimes socialism. But in so doing, they are trying to make very complex and theoretical something that is really very simple and very practical.
Slaves are made in such ways.
Greetings, everyone. Most of the information that I'm going to share with you all here today, less than 1% of the people on planet Earth fully understand how deep the rabbit hole really goes. A lot of the information that I'm sharing with you is for your personal edification and further research. For people who have a cursory knowledge of the UCC, I ask that you be patient, because in order to fully get a 360-degree perspective on what's going on, I have to sort of take it from the top. Now, basically, the first order of law is called natural law. And as children of the Creator, we are all under natural law. Something has happened in the process that has removed us from natural law and placed us under artificial law. And that process, it took place during our birth. An artificial corporate entity was created at birth through the birth certificate, and your mother was listed as the informant, and she gave you over to the state. And this is evidenced by your name in all capitals. At this point, your birth certificate was sent to Washington, D.C. with a certificate of live birth, and a bond was placed on this. This bond is a significant amount of money. It's also through your Social Security. You were entered into a trust through the Social Security card. You have your Social Security numbers, and then on the back of your Social Security number, some people it's red, you have 9 figures. The first one is a letter. It's a letter from anywhere from A through L. Those letters indicate which Federal Reserve Bank is holding your exemption. After that, you have a series of 8 numbers. Altogether, these numbers create what's known as your priority exemption account. And basically, this priority exemption account is been used all over by different corporations. It is considered a banded property. It's considered intellectual property, and also considered a banded property because you haven't claimed it. And you haven't claimed it because you have no awareness of it. And basically, corporations all over, including your jobs, are using your exemption priority number. And this is basically how the whole scam is set up. Now, you have to understand that there's the flesh and blood person, and then there's the straw man. Anything you do in commerce is not predicated on the flesh and blood person. It's predicated on the straw man. You could look at your driver's license, your birth certificate, your work check, your any commercial document. It is not you, the flesh and blood person. It is an artificial corporate entity known as the straw man. And until you take commercial control of this straw man, the state has full control of it. And this is basically how they have been manipulating us as a people. It's not predicated on race. Everybody is being screwed by this, no matter what color you are. I just want to point out that the United States, unbeknownst to many, is not a country. It is a corporation. So we have to be able to understand these concepts and see them as they really are. I'm going to ask my friend Don just to read a little bit.
Okay, this is United States, U.S., U.S. USA, and America. It means A federal corporation, Title 28 U.S.C., which is United States Code, Section 3002-5, Chapter 176. It is clear that the United States is a corporation. 534 Federal Supplement 724. It is well stated that United States et al. Is a corporation originally incorporated February 21st, 1871, under the name District of Columbia, 16 Stat. 419, Chapter 62. It was reorganized June 11th, 1878, a bankrupt organization per House Joint Resolution 192 on June 5th, 1933, Senate Report 93, 549, and Executive Orders 6072, 6102, and 6246, a de facto government, originally the 10 square mile tract ceded by Maryland and Virginia, and comprising Washington, D.C.
Okay, excuse me.
Go.
I'm just going to interrupt as he reads. No, don't go nowhere. Originally, the U.S. just consisted of the 10 square miles within Washington, D.C. And through contracts, it contracted with different states to expand that name to the rest of the states.
Plus the possessions, territories, forts, and arsenals. The significance of this is that a corporation, as a corporation, the United States has no more authority to implement its laws against we the people than does McDonald's corporations, except for one thing: the contracts we've signed as surety for our straw man with the United States and the creditor bankers. These contracts binding us together with the United States and the bankers are actually not with us, but with our artificial entity, or as they term it, person, in quotes, which appears to be us, but spelled with all capital letters.
So it is key to understand that they are a corporation, and in order to have control over us, they had to create an artificial entity, also known as a corporation, to extend their power onto the flesh and blood man. And then when we sign these adhesion contracts that are not revealing the true nature of the bindingness of the contract, this is how we end up getting into submission into these corporations. I want everyone, when they go home tonight, to take their checkbook, to look at the signature line on the checkbook, what you may have thought was just a line. And if you take a magnifying glass and turn it upside down, you will see that it says authorized rep, all across the signature line. Because you, the flesh and blood person, are actually the authorized rep for the straw man, unbeknownst to you. So also through the birth certificate, through the 14th Amendment. That is the beginning of the creation of the U.S. citizen. U.S. citizen, as we've been taught to believe, is also the straw man, part of the corporate fiction. And we need to understand how this came into creation. Back in June 11th, 1878, which is the real birth date of the corporation of the U.S. This is why a lot of astrologers try to do a chart for the U.S. and they can't read it because they're using the July 4th date, which is the inception of the Constitution. But we're not under that. We've long been under that. That was part of the Republic. And they slowly moved us into a democracy and into a whole corporate structure. And so it is important, if we're thinking about freedom, that we have to separate ourselves from the corporate fiction and the flesh and blood person. Also in 1933, we had what was known as the New Deal. This is when the whole corporate fiction began. It was already, the groundwork was already laid out in the 14th Amendment, where it's the beginning. You know, we have thought that that meant freedom and the slaves. Are incorrect. That is the beginning of creating a U.S. citizen. Prior to that, there was no such thing as a U.S. citizen. A U.S. citizen is only a corporate fiction that exists within the matrix, because it's a fiction of law. It does not exist. So in 1933, you had the whole collapse of the economy. And that's when FDR, he was president, and, you know, we all heard in history class of the New Deal program. And, you know, it was sold to us that he resurrected the country from bankruptcy and he saved the day. But that is at the point where he began and sold the entire country into bankruptcy. It was bankrupt in June 11th, 1878, and with a country or corporation, well, with an individual person, bankruptcy lasts for 7 years. With a corporation, it lasts for 70. So it had to be redone in 33, which was the whole point of FDR. You know, as I say, the real deal of the New Deal, it was a raw deal. So this is when he created the Maternity Act, and he made it mandatory that everyone have birth certificates upon the birth of a child. And so with the birth certificate, as I said earlier, they placed a bond on that birth certificate and they sold that bond to the international bankers. The international bankers owns everyone that is a straw man. If you haven't separated yourself from your straw man, then you are state property, a ward of the state. And basically, they're moving in to collect on their assets. Through the creation of the birth certificate, they also removed all the lawful money. The Constitution says the only lawful money is gold and silver. And through the removal of gold and silver, that placed them out of alignment with the Constitution, and it made them a de facto illegal government. And this is how they came about with ferns, or Federal Reserve notes, which is an illegal form of money. But however, to protect themselves and to have what's known as plausible deniability, in case any of us woke up to realize that we're using illegal money according to our very Constitution, they erected a plan known as HJR 192. So they had everyone bring in all their gold. You had a certain amount of days to go to the bank and bring in all of your gold and silver. And then we began the use of ferns, Federal Reserve notes, which are currently not backed by anything. This is money that we're all striving and killing ourselves for, is nothing more than another debt instrument. It only has value because it's perceived to have value. And this is why they're panicking with the Homeland Security and all of these different things, because as people wake up, they will realize that these funds that we've been using is useless. It's another debt instrument, and it is not backed by anything. So with the creation of HJR 192, it's set up where the sovereigns would be able to discharge all their debts, public and private, by using their exemptions. As I explained to everyone earlier, the exemptions are the numbers on the back of your Social Security card. Unfortunately, it has taken us at least 70 years from back then to figure out how to tap into your exemptions, because there was never any instructions or any information as to how to use your exemptions. Only major corporations basically have been tapping into and accessing your exemptions, A, because you haven't claimed it, and it's considered a bandit property. So in this HJR 192, there was a remedy so that should the people ever confront the government for treason by not using lawful forms of currency, they had a plausible deniability. They're like, well, we gave you all HJR 192 to discharge your debt, but, you know, if you never figured it out, that's, you know, your problem, your concern. So this is basically how they covered themselves to introduce this fictitious form of money. Now, we have to also understand one of the things we've never been taught in this Prussian school system is how to navigate commerce. And one of the key things is that we have to keep in mind that the U.S. corporation is under a bankruptcy. And under a bankruptcy, all the commercial rules change. It's actually the reverse of everything you've been taught. And this is one of the reasons why we've had so much difficulty. Some of it I have to read because it's very technical and I don't want to bastardize the information by not being clear.
Okay, this is the United States Congressional Record, March 17th, 1993, volume 33, page H, 1303. In red, it says, "This is important." Speaker Representative James Traficant, Jr., Ohio, addressing the House. And it's in quotes. "Mr. Speaker, we are here now in Chapter 11. That's bankruptcy for all who don't know. Members of Congress are official trustees, presiding over the greatest reorganization of any bankrupt entity in world history, the U.S. government. We are setting forth, hopefully, a blueprint for our future. There are some who say it is a coroner's report that will lead to our demise. It is an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act, March 9, 1933, 48 Stat 1, Public Law, 89-719, declared by President Roosevelt, being bankrupt and insolvent. HJR 192, 73rd Congress, M. Session, June 5, 1933. Joint resolution to suspend the gold standard and abrogate the gold clause, dissolved the sovereign authority of the United States and the official capacities of all United States governmental officers and departments, and is further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only. The receivers of the United States bankruptcy are the international bankers via the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF.
These entities all own everyone's straw man, and they're in the process of getting ready to cash in.
All United States offices, officials, and departments are now operating within a de facto status. De jure would be a real government. Right. De facto is a fictitious, insolvent government. In name only, under Emergency War Powers Act. With the constitutional Republican form of government now dissolved, the receivers of the bankruptcy have adopted a new form of government for the United States. This new form of government is known as a democracy, being an established socialist communist order under a new government for America. This act was instituted and established by transferring and or placing the office of the Secretary of Treasury to that of the Governor of the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF. Public Law 94-564, page 8, Section HR 13955 reads in part, the U.S. Secretary of Treasury receives no compensation for representing the United States. Continue, oh, that's good.
Okay. Well, okay, I just want to define principle because we are in a bankruptcy. That's why it's key. You have to understand all of these corporations are insolvent. The only real money out there is you, is me. That's it. Because we're under insolvency. But because they're under admiralty, colorable jurisdiction, they get to flip mode it. And they're actually using your exemption. I wouldn't suggest unless you fully understood what you were doing. But if you were to ask to see their 1099, 1096, OID, INT, and PTR, you will see that your name is listed as the principal, the fiduciary, the creditor, and the principal. We are the creditors because they are using our exemption. Without our exemption, you would, this whole thing would crumble. And they are listed as the fiduciary debtors because they are insolvent.
Tell them how much the exemption is worth.
The exemption is worth millions and billions. And we're at the point where we've been studying this and researching it, and we finally have dissected how to tap into our exemption by using an international bill of exchange under the guidelines of UNITRAL. UNITRAL is the United Nations trade law. And it has, you can go to the website for yourself and begin to look at it. There's an international promissory note. There's the international bill of exchange. In order to use the bill of exchange, you can only use it on pre-existing debt. In order to use the promissory note, that's to buy things. And this is how they've been tapping into our exemption. And there's several chapters throughout the Bible that talks about, like, the worst thing you could possibly do is to be a debtor. And they have flipped all their debt onto us. Some people may say, well, you know, why should I care about this? I don't have any credit card. I don't have any debt. The national debt is probably about $7.8 trillion. According to the U.S. Code, the national debt should never exceed $6.5 trillion. The day that it went over was the day we had 9/11. So this is how ill this is. All the banking records, the bonds, were housed in the first floor of the World Trade Center. That's the real reason that that had to go. Okay? So we are at the point now where, well, let me go to the prison system. When you're stopped by the police, they're putting in their computers all updated, latest state-of-the-art stuff. They're beginning the assessment process. They're putting you into the computer, your Strawman into the computer, and they're going through your exemption, but through the cops, they wouldn't, it's not listed as an exemption. It's listed as QSIP or auto tryst number. So when the case goes into, you know, you say you're arrested, it goes to the court, immediately a bond is placed on those charges for X amount of dollars. There's really no such thing as criminal charges. All charges are civil. It's all about the Benjamins. Even murder goes for $4 million. So if you can discharge the debt, the criminal charges, thank you. If you can discharge the criminal charges, there you have your get out of jail, go free card. And that would be done through a bill of exchange. Now this, I'm making it seem very simple. It's not. But I just want to, it can be done, but it's not a simple process. You know, we know of one guy who's gotten 12 people out of jail already just using this process. You would begin putting in a letter of rogatory, which would show that you're a foreigner, you're the flesh and blood person, and you're foreign to the corporate jurisdiction. The one thing everybody can start doing today is whenever you sign your name, just sign agent behind it. That does not make you liable for the straw man. That, you know, either agent or trustee. And whatever, some places may not allow you to do it because they know that they can't bag you for it later. But the most important thing is that I encourage and employ everyone to begin doing their own research. Being free is not free. Being free is not easy. But this is why they've created the Homeland Security, where basically, you know, farting in public could put you in jail under some code. You know, they're doing things that's criminalizing everything. They are preparing because they've made so much money on the bonds in the prison system. When you go into the prison system, they use your bond, they tap into your exemption, then they're pimping you inside by having you make all these things that they sell in the commercial world. And this is really what's funding the war in Iraq. And the prison system is funding the whole enchilada. And also, because they're making stupid money doing this, they're now wanting to expand it to the general public. Because even though you may not have personal debt, every U.S. citizen is responsible for about 30,000 of this national debt. And this is why they're having the concentration camps. Everything is being prepared. You're seeing they're fixing up the streets, so they're reinforcing it so the tanks can come through. And they're doing doing everything to prepare to make more money on the whole entire population, because unbeknownst to them, they are responsible for the national debt. So it's critical that we begin to think sovereignly and begin to start to separate ourselves from the artificial corporate fiction. So at the very least, you can begin to start to sign as agent. So for future debt or whatever, they cannot physically attach that to you.